The hallway stretched longer when she turned off the lights. At first, Mara thought it was just her eyes adjusting. The apartment had always been narrow. An old building with thin walls and a floor plan that seemed designed by someone who distrusted open space. The hallway connected the living room to the bedroom and bathroom. A simple corridor with beige paint and one dim ceiling fixture that hummed faintly when it was on. During the day, it looked ordinary. 8 steps from the living room to the bedroom door. She had counted once while carrying laundry. 8 steps. No more. But that night, sometime after midnight, Mara turned off the hallway light and noticed something strange. The darkness didn't settle the way darkness usually did. It deepened. She stood at the living room entrance, hands still on the switch. The bulb clicked off, and the hallway in front of her swallowed the light like water swallowing a dropped stone. It looked longer, not dramatically, just farther away than it should have been. The bedroom door, usually a pale rectangle even in dim light, had dissolved into shadow. Mara blinked. Her eyes watered slightly as they adjusted, trying to build shapes out of blackness. She stepped forward. 1, 2, 3. The floorboards creaked softly under her weight, the sound carrying strangely far down the corridor. 4, 5, 6. Her hand brushed the wall where the light switch should have been halfway down. 7, 8. But the bedroom door wasn't there. She stopped. The hallway continued forward, an empty stretch of darkness that should not have existed. Mara stood very still, her breathing suddenly loud in the quiet apartment. Then she laughed softly. "Okay," she murmured to the empty hall. "That's weird." She turned back and flicked the light on. The bulb hummed to life. The hallway snapped back to normal. 8 steps. Bedroom door right where it belonged. Mara stared at it for a long moment. Her chest tightened with a faint, irrational thrill, like the feeling of standing near a cliff edge. She walked to the bedroom door. 8 steps exactly. She turned around. The living room entrance sat comfortably behind her. The hallway was short, mundane, harmless. She turned the light off again. Darkness poured in. The hallway stretched. Not suddenly, not violently. It unfolded. The walls seemed to slide away from her, the floor lengthening beneath her feet like something slowly waking from sleep. Mara stood perfectly still. The bedroom door retreated into shadow. A strange pressure settled behind her eyes. "Okay," she whispered. She walked forward again. 1, 2, 3. The air felt colder the deeper she went. 4, 5, 6. Her hand skimmed along the wall. 7, 8. Still no door. 9, 10, 11. The silence inside the hallway felt thick, almost padded. The apartment noises, the refrigerator hum, the faint traffic outside, had faded away completely. There was only her breathing, and the quiet creak of the floorboards beneath her. She stopped again. Her phone light flicked on with a small tap. The beam cut forward through the darkness. The hallway extended at least another 20 feet. Mara frowned. The walls looked normal. Same beige paint, same scuffed baseboards, but the ceiling seemed slightly higher now. The air smelled faintly like dust and something older, like the inside of a closed attic. She turned around. The living room entrance looked farther away than it should have. Her stomach dropped. Nope. She walked back quickly. 7 steps. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Her foot crossed the threshold. She turned the light back on. The hallway was short again. 8 steps. Exactly. Mara stood in the living room for a long time, staring at it. Then she turned the light off again. The hallway stretched. This time she expected it. Still, the slow, silent expansion made the skin on her arms rise. It wasn't just longer. It was attentive. She couldn't explain why she felt that way. But standing at the entrance, staring into the extended darkness, she had the uncomfortable sensation of standing in front of something that had just opened an eye. She walked forward again. 8 steps, 12 steps, 16. Each step felt slightly softer than the last, as though the floorboards were absorbing her weight. She noticed something else too. The walls had begun to change. Not dramatically, not in ways she could point to directly. But the paint looked older here. The baseboards were nicked in unfamiliar patterns. And the hallway had gained a second ceiling light fixture. It hung above her now, dark and silent. Mara stopped beneath it. "This isn't my hallway." The words sounded small. The silence absorbed them. She lifted her phone light and shone it ahead. The corridor extended far beyond the beam's reach. Something about the darkness ahead made her throat tighten. Not fear, recognition. Like walking into a room where someone had been waiting a long time. She turned back again. The living room entrance was still there. But it looked wrong. Too small. Too distant. She felt suddenly certain of something. The hallway didn't change because the light went off. The hallway had always been this long. The light had just been hiding it. A cold thought slid quietly into place. The apartment wasn't attached to the hallway. The hallway was attached to the apartment. Like a doorway. Or a mouth. Mara felt the space around her shift. Not physically. Emotionally. The air seemed to focus on her. The walls did not move. But they felt aware. She took one more step forward. The floor creaked softly. The sound echoed down the corridor, repeating itself faintly, as though the hallway were learning the noise. Mara realized something then. Every time she walked into the dark hallway, it had grown slightly longer. Not just in the moment. Permanently. She turned around slowly. The living room entrance looked even farther away now. Smaller. Like the opening of a tunnel seen from deep underground. Her chest tightened. The hallway wasn't part of the apartment. The apartment was just touching it. Like a raft brushing against something vast in the ocean. And she had stepped farther inside than anyone before her. Behind her, somewhere in the darkness, a floorboard creaked. Not under her feet. Ahead of her. Mara didn't move. The silence that followed felt almost curious. Then slowly, very slowly, another creak sounded farther down the hall. As if something were walking toward her. Or perhaps simply shifting its weight. Mara turned off her phone light. The darkness deepened immediately. The hallway stretched again. And somewhere inside that impossible distance, something seemed to pause. As though pleased she had finally noticed it. Behind her, the small square of apartment light flickered once. Then went out. In the final darkness, Mara understood one last thing. The hallway hadn't been observing her. It had been waiting for her to come far enough inside. That the house would no longer be able to find her. Her slippers were wet. She hadn't left the house. At first I thought the kitchen floor must have been damp. That was the simplest explanation. Condensation from the fridge, maybe. A little spill I'd forgotten to wipe up. The apartment was old enough that small inconveniences like that happened often. Still, the feeling was wrong. I stood in the narrow glow of the kitchen light, looking down at my feet. The soft fabric of my slippers was darkened around the toes, soaked through in a way that suggested more than a careless puddle. When I shifted my weight, the material made a faint squelch. The sound felt too loud for the quiet apartment. I hadn't gone outside all evening. I was sure of that. The rain tapping gently against the living room window had kept me inside since sunset. I'd spent the night reading on the couch, occasionally drifting into that hazy half-sleep that comes when a book rests open in your lap and the world grows very still. At some point I'd gotten up to make tea, and now my slippers were wet. I stepped carefully onto the kitchen tile. Cold seeped through the thin soles. I frowned and crouched, pressing 2 fingers against the floor. Dry. The tiles were perfectly dry. I checked the sink. No dripping faucet. No puddles. The counter was spotless. I stood slowly, glancing around the small kitchen as if something might reveal itself if I looked long enough. Nothing did. The refrigerator hummed quietly behind me. The clock on the microwave glowed 12:47 in soft green digits. Rain ticked against the window in an irregular rhythm. Everything was ordinary, except my feet. I walked into the living room. Each step left a faint, dark mark on the hardwood floor. I stared at the prints trailing behind me. They weren't muddy, just wet, clear outlines of the slippers, damp and slowly fading as the wood absorbed the moisture. I followed the trail backward. It began at the couch. I sat down slowly, staring at the place where my feet had rested earlier. The carpet beneath the coffee table was dry. The couch cushions were dry. Even the blanket I'd been using felt perfectly normal. I lifted one foot and touched the slipper. The fabric was thoroughly soaked. Cold. The kind of cold water gets when it's been sitting somewhere deep and undisturbed. A quiet unease began to creep up the back of my neck. I stood again and walked to the hallway. The light there was dimmer, a yellow bulb that flickered slightly whenever the building's heater kicked on. My footsteps left more wet prints behind me. They ended at the bathroom door. I paused. The bathroom light was off. The door stood half open. From inside came a faint smell. Not unpleasant exactly, just damp. I pushed the door open. The bathroom looked normal. The tile floor gleamed under the light when I flicked it on. The bathtub curtain hung still. The sink was dry. But something about the room felt subtly wrong. I stepped inside. The slippers made the same soft squelch. I looked down. Water pooled faintly around my feet now, thin as condensation but unmistakable. I crouched again and touched the tile. Cold, wet, but only beneath me. The rest of the floor remained dry. I stood slowly. The mirror above the sink had begun to fog slightly. That was strange. I hadn't run hot water. I wiped the glass with my palm. The fog cleared, revealing my reflection staring back at me with the faint confusion of someone trying to remember something important. Behind me, the bathroom looked exactly as it should. Except, I turned around. The bathtub curtain swayed gently. Just once. Then it stilled. My chest tightened. The window was closed. The vent fan was off. The air in the bathroom felt heavy and unmoving. "Hello," I said quietly. The words seemed to settle into the room and dissolve. I waited. Nothing happened. The curtain remained still. I stepped closer. The floor beneath my slippers grew wetter. A small puddle formed around my toes, spreading slowly outward. I watched it, my pulse beginning to thump softly in my ears. Water was appearing beneath my feet. Not dripping, not flowing, just being there. I lifted one foot. The puddle remained. I placed it down again. The water deepened slightly. My mouth went dry. The sound came then. Soft, barely audible. A faint shifting sound from inside the tub, like water adjusting its weight. I stared at the curtain. The plastic liner moved again. Not swaying, sliding. A slow ripple traveled across its surface, as though something had brushed against it from the inside. The bathroom suddenly felt much smaller. The puddle around my slippers had begun to creep outward, thin fingers of water spreading across the tile. I stepped backward. The water followed, not flowing from the tub, not spreading from the sink, just appearing wherever I stood, as if it were arriving with me. The curtain twitched again. A gentle tap sounded from the other side. Not knocking, more like something pressing experimentally against the plastic. My mind began searching desperately for explanations. A leak, a burst pipe, sleepwalking, but none of those explained the way the water seemed to move with my steps. I backed into the hallway. The puddle followed. It slid quietly across the tile and onto the wood floor, leaving a glossy trail that stretched toward the living room. My breathing had grown shallow. The apartment felt different now, quieter. Even the rain against the window had faded. The only sound was the faint shifting of water around my feet. I looked down. The puddle had grown wider. Too wide. The water was no longer just beneath my slippers. It extended several feet around me now, a shallow pool spreading across the floorboards. But the wood wasn't warping. The water wasn't soaking in. It simply rested there, still, reflective, and deep enough now that the reflections looked wrong. The ceiling light stretched strangely in the surface. The hallway appeared longer in the reflection than it did in reality. I crouched slowly, staring into the water. My reflection stared back. But it was delayed. Just slightly. I lifted my hand. The reflection lifted its hand a moment later. Cold pressure filled my chest. I stood quickly. The water moved. Not splashing. Not rippling. It shifted toward me, like a tide adjusting around a rock. The realization came quietly. The water wasn't in the apartment. The apartment was in the water, or touching it, like something thin resting on the surface of something deeper. Behind me, the bathroom curtain rustled again. I turned. A thin line of water had begun to slip from beneath the doorframe. Not dripping, sliding, like something gently breathing on the other side. The puddle around my feet deepened another inch. The surface trembled faintly. I looked down once more. This time, the reflection in the water wasn't just me. There was something behind me, not a shape exactly, more like a distortion in the darkness of the hallway reflection. Something vast moving slowly through the mirrored space beneath the floor. I didn't turn around. The water rose slightly around my ankles. The apartment remained silent, but the reflection continued to move. And somewhere deep beneath the thin surface of the house, something seemed to realize. I had finally noticed it,